could soon face jail terms for misconduct while managing banks. Chancellor George Osborne has backed tougher rules for the industry, but his response to proposals from the Parliamentary Commission on banking standards is already drawing criticism. RT's Tessa Arcili joins us now from London with the details. So Tessa, what exactly does Osborne's support for new banking rules mean?
Well, first of all, let's remember that George Osborne's call for jail time for bankers who were accused of reckless behavior, it has gotten a lot of coverage because of how big that statement is. He is supporting the Parliamentary Banking Commission's recommendations, essentially on stricter guidelines. We know now that the banking reform bill is up for debate in Parliament. However, the critics are pointing out that Osborne, they simply don't believe what he's saying, that it will actually amount to anything. Basically, they're saying that the legitimacy of banks have been eroded so much after the financial crisis that Osborne was simply forced to say something like that in order to appease his critics. Well, let's get more insight on what this all actually means from Alessio Rastani. He's a financial trader. You are in the industry. Should bankers be shaking in their shoes right now because of this big statement from Osborne?
Well, some would argue that the best punishment for the banks would not be necessarily to jail them, but to stop what has been going on in the last few years, is bailing them out with public money every time they get it wrong and every time they bring the economy to its knees. So perhaps some would argue that the best punishment for them would be to, hey, next time you screw up, we won't bail you out with public money. However, I don't necessarily think that's going to be enough. We need some element of deterrence. Banks, unfortunately, have lost, and justifiably have lost, trust with the public. Mm-hmm. Banks need to realize the most important currency in the world is not sterling, it's not the dollar, it's not the euro, it's not even gold, it's trust. You lose trust with the public, you've lost...
Well, perhaps that trust will be regained if they start seeing bankers who are guilty in handcuffs, but will it actually take place? I mean, there are those who argue that this is simply, Osborne was simply dragged into saying something like this. Will it actually happen?
I'm sure there is some political element to this to win populist vote with the electorate. There's no doubt about that. Will it work, as you correctly point out? Here's one thing. My background actually is in law. I used to work with some of the best barristers and judges in this country in the criminal law firms and courts. One thing any barrister will tell you is that satisfying the British criminal definition of criminality is going to be very difficult, especially when it comes to something like this in the banks, to prove, because in British law what we have is something called mens rea, which is the mental element of a crime. How will they prove the mental element, the mens rea of recklessness, in response to banks? Because how can they prove they recklessly did what they did?
So are you saying that it's just impossible to prove reckless behavior?
No, I wouldn't say it's impossible. A good argument can be made for it. Proving it is what I think is going to be extremely difficult. The proof is going to be very difficult indeed.
And frankly, you are in the industry, you are inside it. Are there a lot of tricks in the trade that the government simply don't see or cannot get through, and this will continue and nothing will change?
There are definitely some tricks of the trade, but the most pressing probably question is going to be the government probably one of the most important arguments that they will be faced, any prosecutor will be faced, would be that bankers can argue, look, we had our equations, we had our formulas, even though they're very bogus formulas, which they had, which told them that the possibility or the probability of a banking crisis or a housing crisis was impossible. I mean, that's what their formulas told them. Even though it's crazy as it sounds, that how in God's earth is it possible that those equations told them that a housing crash was near impossible or unlikely. But that's what they worked with.
Well, looking forward now, just one answer to this question, yes or no. Do you think anything will change?
No. The public should realize that essentially, unless they wake up and wisen up, the market is rigged against you. Okay, the market will always be rigged against them.
All right.
So nothing's going to change.
Thank you very much for that. Well, as you know, so there's stricter guidelines being debated in Parliament. However, news like financial regulators having found the £27.1 billion a hole in the balance sheet of some banks, now really that brings the confusion of the disconnect between the talk and what is actually being done.
Right, and that was RT's Tessa Arcili talking to independent financial trader Alessio Rastani live from London. Thank you so much. And up ahead.